Right. So let's understand the first part of the first half of our readings. All right. I've got this handy little pink marker so that when I made the quiz for week 1 in Hinduism, I wouldn't go past that page in any of the questions I asked. The quiz for our first week of Hinduism is just a very small quiz. Your 20 points of participation, and it will. I am kind of a coach by nature, and I'm trying to build a structure into this online environment that's going to be the best for you, that will help raise the bar and reinforce your learning of the material and your preparation of it. So I want the important stuff to be able to stick with you and for you to understand it well. So for this first quiz, you're going to be expecting questions coming out of that first readings for this week, the first half of the chapter on Hinduism, and the ER pages. Let's have a quick look over at the ER pages. So, exploring religions, I've had one student say that the link doesn't work for her. I haven't heard anybody else having problems. If it isn't working for you, Google Exploring Religions Wyoming, and you will find this page. And then, because we're starting with Hinduism, you'll go there, and here we go. Now, if we have a look here at Cosmos, and you're thinking about how do I prepare for this little mini quiz, think headings and vocabulary. The headings and subheadings of Flesher's pages, as well as the vocabulary in his glossary, are what you're going to look for. What I'm building the quiz on, because this is the structure that gives integrity to all of this crazy data. The same thing for what I'll pull from the book. If you understand the subheadings and how the data within those subheadings fits into the larger picture of Hinduism, and you have a look at those terms in the glossary that are italicized, you will be preparing yourself well, you'll be studying well, and you should do fine on the quiz. It is, okay, I think I've covered ER, PR. So let's have a look then at the first half of Hinduism. And this is dense writing, I can tell you that, but I hope you'll find that by having done the ER pages first, the Exploring Religions pages first, that you get really quite a nice primer on it, and it'll come together for you that way. Let's just have one other look here, that this course is set up as modules. So I better go over here like this and do that. All right, so modules. And so if each week I'm hoping you guys are going to come in here to the Question the Prof and bring your questions from both the dense book and the really interesting ideas of this course. So I go in here, I got to tell you, I'm thinking you guys want to work with me on this stuff. So when I see that nobody is posting, it's kind of like being all dressed up with nowhere to go. So give me somewhere to go. The book. If you have a look then at the way this first chapter is organized, with the Indus Valley civilization moving into Vedism and Brahmanism, moving into classical Indian civilization, I believe there are 6 different subheadings of time periods that we're covering in this first section. And talk about Mission Impossible. When you're starting at 6000 BCE and making your way all the way up to post-colonial India, this is Mission Impossible. I'll try to make it a little bit simpler for you on key points. That with the Indus Valley civilization starting in Pakistan, starting as old as 6000 BCE, we get the very beginnings of a tradition that we know includes altars, has a sense of sacrifice, and has already developed a study and discipline of the body between yoga and the ritual celebration of the lingam. And yes, lingam is a phallus-shaped object, and you pour milk on it, you pour honey on it, you put garlands around it, because the creation, Brahman as the creation, Brahman is both the creator and the creation. The lingam is the symbol of that. And so, by golly, you travel through India and you'll see plenty of lingam. That with Vedism and Brahmanism coming in 1500 to 500 BC, we have an influx, the Aryans coming down, and as they mingle and dominate in the area, they establish a hierarchy and a class who will now be in charge of all of this ritual and sacrifice stuff. And the Brahmins, who repeat the word Brahman, 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 right? They become the Brahmin class, this kind of a repetitive chanting as part of the work they need to do to manifest the divine in the world. Over time, we read that there comes a criticism of the Vedas with the Upanishads. I'm stepping ahead of myself here. I'm going to take one step back with the Vedism and the Brahmins to think about what sacrifice means, because this gets carried through, and this is a fairly complex section of the book. That when you picture creation itself as a sacrifice of that it is through violence that creation itself begins, our authors are telling us that a sacrifice of dismemberment that is the source of creation then creates a kind of economy where you have to remember, if something got dismembered to create it, that the way it gets worked out in the Hindu cosmos, the landscape and its inhabitants, is that the humans then have a responsibility to remember that creative moment, from dismemberment to remember. And the remember through that act of burning or sacrificing even life is actually meant to remember the original creation in and thereby connect the human with that ultimate creative power. Now, part of what they say is that over time, once the Upanishads come in, they start saying, it's just really not the ritual itself. You can't just go like cutting horse throats and burning stuff. What we need to do is introspectively reach through intellectual enlightenment a recognition that Atman is Brahman. And so the Upanishads usher in the Ad-Vedas, the Vedantas, so the end of the Vedas, the Vedantas. And because they're moving away, it's like a Reformation was, if you're familiar with the European Reformation, they're moving away from ritual practice towards an argument regarding consciousness achieved through breathing, meditation, concentration, all the arms, the limbs, the 8 limbs of yoga, and through philosophical introspection. So that's what that whole 308 page is all about. And that a guru relationship starts to become important because these levels, these heights of concentration and consciousness and awareness require discipline and training. Now, with classical Indian civilization, 500 BCE to 1000 CE, they tell us this is part of the axial age. It's a remarkable moment when in the Middle East, you have great civilizations and religious traditions beginning. In China, you have Lao Tzu and you have Chinese religions beginning to develop very strongly. So the axial age is this moment where the creation of city-states with agriculture centralizes people in a way that the organization of major religious traditions develops. And the book spends the most time on classical Hinduism because of that, that out of this axial age develops the greatest stories. And with religious traditions, it is this powerful stories that live on and get told and get told. And it is through this moment of classical Hinduism that the Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata, the great texts get written. And so I'm going to leave it at that. I hope that helps you crack through some of the tough stuff there. And you'll see that after a long discussion of the classical, then it finally moves into the medieval period. So that tells you how important the stuff in the classical is. And it'll go from medieval to the modern and to the post-colonial. Good luck, and talk to me in the Question the Prof.